God save the Queen!
Hello and welcome back to Pod Save the Queen for our end of year review. We're recording this a little bit early. It is the 11th of December, but you're probably feeling very festive at the moment with maybe some mince pies or some mulled wine. I mean, we would definitely recommend sitting down with something nice, or maybe you just need to take a break from your family and hang out with us instead over the holiday season. But there is a lot to look back on over this year. So I have invited probably my most regular partner in crime this year, Russell Myers, our royal editor.
Nice. Hello.
Hello. I've enjoyed working with you this year,
It's been
Russell.
a pleasure.
I shall just say that at the top of the show. She'll say that at the top of the show. Ian Vogler has sent in some little voice messages for us.
I saw him today as well,
which is a good thing.
Yes.
So we'll be dropping those in through to get the photographer's view on what has been going on this year. And we've also, I guess, whether this is to find out whether Russell's been naughty or nice this year, we've invited his boss back in, Alison Phillips,
What's
the
this
editor
Cole doing
of
in
the
this
Daily
bag?
Mirror.
Hello.
Hello, Alison. Welcome
very,
back.
very nice.
As
ever. Yeah.
So we wanted to get Alison in because you've heard me and Russell talking a lot this year about various different things across the royal calendar, and we thought it would be useful and interesting and refreshing to get a different perspective from someone who's in charge of the whole paper, the whole lot, all the sport, the politics.
Well, they've certainly filled quite a few pages this year. It's been a good old year for the royals.
Gosh, yeah.
Yes.
Very busy.
Oh, thousands of words Russell has written, hundreds of pictures and thousands of pictures Ian's taken. But yes, it's probably fair to say it has been a mixed year for the royal family. Started badly, was probably quite good in the middle, and then has ended pretty badly. So we had Prince Philip crashing his car back at the beginning, which seems like a lifetime ago.
Yeah,
it doesn't. I know it's been a year nearly, right? But it feels as though an awful lot has happened. But that's still pretty, fresh in the memory, because that's probably like the last real time we saw him out and about.
Yeah,
and so that's still quite fresh.
Everyone was very angry about that.
That
really incident, because and that was a huge story for us, wasn't it? And and then the woman who had been injured in the accident came forward and spoke. And again, there was a sort of, at that point, this sense that the royal family weren't still quite operating like the rest of us do.
Yeah, and it's that kind of that distance and aloofness and not being quite in tune with the public mood, which has struck with a vengeance at the end of the year, really, with Prince Andrew's absolute, cataclysmic appearance on Newsnight.
Yeah, I mean, Prince Andrew's done more damage, I think, to the royal family in the last month or so than perhaps anybody else in the last 2 decades, in that he really has shown the arrogance that the royal family have done quite a good job of hiding from the rest of us, if it's actually there in recent years.
Because I mean, you've been working in news for you. I mean, you were there in the 90s, like
there in the.
You were
90s.
there. I mean, you were basically there hanging out with Diana.
For the toe sucking, not myself, obviously. There for watching the Diana Panorama interview through all those awful, dreadful times. And there were times, I guess, back then when the royal family did look like that ongoing soap opera. But I think what's been different this year, particularly the Prince Andrew thing, is there's a criminal part of what's been going on, his friendship with a convicted paedophile, and that also the complete lack of understanding as to what is acceptable in the public mind now.
And I guess it is a very different space that we all operate in now. It's it's the era of rolling news, it's social media and everything. The way the spotlight works is very different. It's not just the papers as a sort of a daily or a waiting to see what drops on a Sunday and how much pressure there is. It's a constant. If you get yourself into that whirlpool, it's very difficult to get out of it. It will go round and round and round and. Probably Christmas is coming at a really good time for the royal family because they'll just kind of disappear.
Yes,
a
although
little bit.
Everyone wants to hear that Queen's speech though this year as to how she's going to sort of come up with her resume of the year. And I think the social media thing's interesting though, isn't it? Because while 15, 20 years ago, Prince Andrew could have done that interview and people would have watched it, and the things they would have said to their partners while they were watching it would have been one thing. But now that's all public. And so it wasn't just the established press having a pop at him for the way he behaved in that interview. It was anyone who saw that interview pretty much thought it was fairly reprehensible.
And it also means that we as journalists, we've got extra eyes watching it, because previously we might only have had, our perspective on it, or
we can judge the mood.
You and your royal pack, you might all sort of be out at a job and comparing notes on things, but we would all be coming at it from a particular angle and a particular experience and in a particular profession as well. Whereas, it's very democratic, Twitter. Everybody gets a say.
Yes, so people have not only been able to actually see what these members of the royal family are really like and what they really think, they've been able to feed back their thoughts on that. And that will not have gone unnoticed by senior royals.
Absolutely not. I mean, you get a snapshot, don't you, of how well it had gone down or not, and just this absolutely staggering avalanche of ill feeling towards him, and people questioning, well, why on earth is this being allowed to happen? Who, then it opens the wider question of who allowed the interview to happen, who was advising him, who he wasn't listening to. So. I mean, like Alison said, it's just been an absolute disaster.
And I think there was the element of Mickey taking was quite interesting as well. So there he was in the interview with Emily Maitlis saying things like, I can't sweat. And then within seconds, someone was putting up on Twitter pictures of him sweating profusely from that time. And it was just that poking fun at the royals, which that hasn't really happened from the public in that way.
There's been all these skits as well, all these videos. And I don't know if you've seen The Man Next Door. Have you seen these videos? They are hilarious. And there's a comedian who put them out on Twitter, and they've been viewed millions and millions of times, and then that becomes part of the story almost,
which
about how ludicrous his story was.
And why the Queen, I guess, for so many years has tried to keep a lid on being out there in public. She does the Queen's speech, but we very rarely hear any of them speak or see what they really think, because every time you put yourself out there, you are letting yourself potentially get knocked down by somebody.
And it hasn't gone too well, these interviews beforehand. So, again, the arrogance that he showed by thinking he could put himself up for an interview, with a seasoned pro like Emily Maitlis, who, again, I mean, some of the questions, there was no smoking gun, but there was just the questions were all in the public domain. He should have been able to navigate it properly if it had been briefed, or if he'd actually done his homework.
Or tell the truth. Or was that other option?
I don't think that was an option, was it? Allegedly.
I guess thinking about, the previous famous Royal Panorama interview was Diana with the real sort of like deer-like eyes and the black coal, and she was very much in the role of the victim already. Going into that, she already had the sympathy of people.
Yes,
really, or are we looking back? Am I looking back through rose-tinted
if
glasses?
Twitter and Facebook had existed back when she did that interview, everyone would have had a view on that. Everyone, and whereas the kind of the view that the royal pack put out after that was that she was the victim, she was the wronged woman, that it was a very simple case of black and white. I do wonder if social media had existed back then, it would have been an awful lot more shades of grey.
She's got a game plan. So. Yeah. She's got a game plan. She's really playing this up. She never does her eye makeup like that.
Exactly. So there's so much more skepticism in the world generally now.
But what it does show, I think, is that she did know what she was trying to achieve, and she did know what,
and she pulled it off brilliantly at the time.
So it's a very, very different time. I mean, how long did it take, do you feel like, the royal family to re-establish a bit of equilibrium in that 90s phase, or did it ever really until the youngsters arrived?
Yeah, if you think
she passed away in 97, you just think this whole decade was.
And then it got worse after that.
Big questions being asked, surely, when that time, was the monarchy going to survive? The way that the Queen had reacted, the relationship between her and Blair at that time became a huge issue.
It was only probably around about the time that Charles and Camilla married. So when would that have been? About 2005?
Yeah.
Then that things seemed to get slightly more back on an even keel. And then you had William and Harry, and as they grew up, there was this sense that they were these great new ambassadors for the monarchy, and everything seemed that much more hopeful.
So we've not just done a review of the year, we've done a little review of the last 2 decades already in our first 10 minutes. So I think it's a good time to let Ian Vogler have his first say on things. We asked him who had had a good year. Who'd had a good year. So this is Ian's take on things.
The royal who has had the best year. The royal who has had the best year. I think really it's been a difficult year, certainly in the last few months. Prince Andrew's kept himself in the news for all the wrong reasons. We've had the potential court action from the Duke and Duchess of Sussex. So I think really it's got to be for me the Queen. The Queen's kept on doing engagements. She's kept the show on the road, and at her age, fantastic. Absolutely fantastic. Rarely misses an engagement, although she does less engagements. But as the head of the family, for me, she's the one that's had the best year.
So Ian went for the Queen, and that was actually one of my favourite comments on the Instagram when I asked people, we're going to be doing our review of the year. What are the things that you stood out for you this year? And someone just replied, Her Majesty, and a picture of a flower. And I just thought that was rather lovely. I mean, considering she's the boss lady, we don't talk about her as much as we possibly should in this show. But I guess that is also indicative of her role has changed, is changing. She is not...
And the ultimate professionalism of her as well, because it is, like the mantra is never complain, never explain, just get on with it, always a smile. Even the same day as Andrew had been forced to step back from public duty, she was out at an engagement and, was all smiles.
You wouldn't have known anything was wrong.
You wouldn't have. No. And, especially just hours before, she'd probably had to sit Andrew down and give him a firm talking to and tell him he wasn't going to be... he wasn't coming to the Christmas party this year.
And the worse the others behave, the more she does shine out as a beacon. However, the only thing I might say, and I really don't want to say anything bad about the Queen because she is amazing and fantastic, I do think going to church with Prince Andrew just after, Russell, remind me, what was something had happened and then she was seen in the back of the car with him on a Sunday morning.
Essentially, well, he'd stepped down on the Wednesday, or he'd stepped back
on the Wednesday,
back. And then on the Saturday...
They went to church. And then they went riding again. There was two incidents, wasn't there, in the whole story. And then she was seen somewhere that she knew, or certainly Prince Andrew would have known, that the photographers were there and they were going to get caught in the same frame together. So it was a very public show of solidarity. And I can understand... From a mother's perspective, she felt she had to do that because her son's been having a really rough time. But in terms of the boss defending someone, I don't know. If she was the CEO, CEO of a big organisation, would you do that?
They were totally staged, those photos. And I think,
Do you think the Queen knew, or do you think Andrew knew, or do you think they both
I think the
knew?
Queen knows exactly where photographers would be at that point in the estate. I think Andrew definitely would, because he turned... to see the photographers, so his face was in frame, and I think that they both would have known that there would have been a show of support. Whether they were advised to do that, I'm not sure. There's a lot been said this week about whether Andrew will appear at Sandringham, whether he will do the walk with the rest of the royal family. Obviously, the Queen gets dropped off in the Bentley these days, but the rest of the royal family walk up to church and then stop and say hello to. I mean. The years that I've been, there's been probably 2,000 or 3,000 people there.
Yes.
So this opens a question. Has a member of the royal family ever been actively booed, especially at Christmas time? I mean, this is a major issue.
Do you think he'll be there?
Well, the noises coming out the palace is that he is going to go. I personally think it's, his position is untenable.
But he's going to go to Sandringham.
He'll go to Sandringham, but why can't he just stay indoors and, be putting a cup of tea on with his dad, who won't be doing the walk? And so it's a perfect get out, isn't it? I mean, I just think that there is quite a lot of ill feeling towards him at the moment. And, could you imagine, this thing's televised. And if people start booing him or shouting things out of the royal family, the other members of the royal family who are obviously aggrieved at what's happened, that, it's just an absolute disaster.
Or even not that, it would be the only, realistically, if he did that, that would be the only thing that we would talk about. That would be our front page picture.
Yes.
It would be, is it okay? Is it not? Would we be able to hear anything from Epstein's victims? Kind of, it just puts the questions back in a really prominent fashion. I mean, I think there's a good reason, there'd be a good options. I mean, Andrew, I hear you've always wanted to go skiing at Christmas. This would be a good year to do it. Yes. Or otherwise you can stay home and peel the potatoes.
Yes. So, I mean, certainly. Because the other person, going back to that point about who's been good this year, I do think Prince Charles as well, for the same reasons around... Prince Andrew's behaviour or the way he acted, certainly around that interview. That was awful. That when Prince Charles was on the tour that he was doing, he went to the Solomon Isles and he went to New Zealand. So he's out there on the other side of the world doing all of that. And unfortunately, what was getting the most attention was his younger brother's behaviour, and that is going to make anyone furious.
Absolutely. Well, we even cancelled our trip to go there,
yes.
which we were going to go and speak to him about climate change, about something that he's made a big play of, especially over the last few years. It's a lifetime's work, but to have journalists actively not being able to go there because of everything that was happening back home.
Standing up the future king because of his little brother.
I know, it's not a good look, is it?
But some of your listeners probably thinking, well, that's your fault. You should have gone. But, we only have finite resources here.
This is a huge story. It's a global story.
And we have to cover that because we have a responsibility to scrutinise what they're doing.
And it was front page pretty much every day for
14 days or something.
For days and days. You mentioned earlier about how the monarchy was in question a bit almost in the 90s. I feel, to me, the Queen is older. Obviously, her mother lived on for many, many more years to come. But to me, it just feels really important that she really hangs around for a while longer to let the kind of everything settle, because can you, at this stage when everything is a little bit febrile, although we've talked about it a little bit before about maybe part of the reason it is febrile is because people do feel there is that changing
succession
time happening, and then there's kind of been talk this month, will the Queen actually formally abdicate or have Prince Charles as a Prince Regent? There was also the very weird situation where there was some WhatsApp group that had made some joke about the Queen dying, and suddenly all of Twitter went wild.
Scourge of social media.
So
I do wonder what might have happened on the Prince Andrew stuff this year if the Queen had already passed away and Prince Charles was then king, what he would have permitted, and whether he might have been a lot more brutal about the whole thing.
My initial view is if he'd have heard of that interview was going to be taking place, he would have marched the BBC crew out himself. You could surely, he knows how bad it can be. He knows how badly it can be perceived. 94 when he did his interview, that was an absolute disaster as well, and then gave rise to Diana doing hers. So
yeah. Was it like my big brother's on the other side of the world? Now would be a really good time to do that thing that I really want to do. Well, certainly,
these allegations of whether he's hoodwinked the Queen, and that's a pretty strong term.
Yes.
But certainly that his team, if you can call them that they had kept the details of the interview away from any of the senior palace officials, and then only told them pretty much at the last, the 11th hour when it was already happening. And then they gave the go-ahead.
You can't work like that in any organisation. It would be like us working here and then one person going off and doing something completely off kilter that nobody else knew about, no permission to do it. And any organisation that does function like that over a long period of time will fall apart. You've got to have discipline. You've got to have authority, and people have got to know what's acceptable and what isn't. And that's why, if I was Prince Charles, that's why I'd be properly furious at Andrew, because he's undermined the Queen.
Well, on that point, I think that's exactly why he went. We've spoken and we've written about the fact that for some of his faults, that the whole family do miss Prince Philip's discipline. And he was the actual patriarch of the family. So certainly the Queen's the monarch, but he was the actual head of the family.
Yes.
And then he kept them all in line. And the fact is that if he knew about this, with all the benefit of experience that he's got, there's no way he would have let this happen. And the fact that Charles got off the plane and went straight to Sandringham to see him tells you everything you know about the sort of almighty telling off that Andrew would have got from the two of them, I imagine.
Aside from the Prince Andrew situation, how do you see Charles and Camilla and how they've evolved into their role and the kind of things they've been doing this year?
Well, I think when you do see them out, they do just seem a kind of a great couple who enjoy the job. I don't know whether they do enjoy it, but they certainly appear to enjoy the job, that kind of throw themselves into whatever tour or visit is that they're doing, engage very well with the people that they're meeting. And I think I have really stepped into the Queen's way of operating, but with a slightly more modern twist.
Totally. If I speak to any of the photographers who certainly follow them around the world, they love working with them. They say they throw themselves in. They'll do all the sort of local traditions. They'll be wearing a grass skirt, the big hats, being taken by 4 muscly men on these big chairs and stuff. But they get right involved, and it is that sort of modern twist on sort of professionalism that the Queen has had, and potentially the younger ones could take a leaf out of their book, because whenever I've been with them, they're a little bit uptight sometimes.
Yes, and there's always like an element of humour whenever you see those photographs. Prince Charles has always got a bit of a smile on his face, as if he can. I know I look ridiculous doing this, but I'm just going to do it anyway.
But again, a lot of people say that's Camilla bringing that out of him, because she's actually really, really good fun. And then she's learned she's taught him to sort of let go a little bit.
So one thing that was definitely good news for Charles and Camilla and the Queen and Prince Philip, and for our Instagram fans who pretty much picked it as their highlight of the year, was the arrival of baby Archie. Yes. So that was some definite
big global
happy
event.
Happy news.
Happy news.
And it actually gave rise to the picture that Ian Fogler wishes he had been able to take this year.
One of the nicest pictures this year comes from the christening of baby Archie. It's the really lovely casual picture taken by Chris Allerton, which shows Meghan holding the young baby with her mother and the Queen looking on, and behind them Prince Harry and Prince Philip. There's several generations of this emerging royal family all gathered together to greet the new individual, and it's just a really lovely picture. Casually dressed, nice, simply lit and simply taken, and it could be a picture of anyone's family, but of course it's not. It's a picture of the royal family showing many generations, the old and the new together. A really lovely picture.
So it is a very special picture. It's the new dimension for the royal family. The settling into that, Harry and Meghan settling into married life and life as parents, and they've moved house. And Harry bounding out, and
that was very sweet.
Huge excitement. I mean, I know it caused a bit of a kerfuffle with how it was all working from a practical point of view for us as people covering it, but from a pure element of, I'm a dad and this is joyful.
Super endearing, wasn't it? I mean, he was absolutely in his element. He was, he's absolutely super happy to be there and talking.
Yeah, and
I think
there had been an issue that we didn't know what they were going to do when the baby was born, whether they were going to let photographers take a picture, whether they were going to release a picture, whether they were going to be just in purdah for a while. It was all, and by that point there was this concern that they were valuing their privacy so much that they were trying to push everybody away. And so that when Prince Harry did come out that day, it was really lovely, and it was like really refreshing, and he seemed relaxed and full of fun, and that was a great sort of beginning at that point. And then we got the lovely, like you say, the lovely christening pictures, which were just fantastic.
I think you've always had a soft spot for Prince Harry, haven't you, Alison?
Definitely a ginger. No, he's great. Why wouldn't you?
They've done a lot of really good things this year. I mean, we've obviously talked previously about the more difficult times that they've had towards the end of this year, when they've kind of put things out in the open, that they are saying that actually we have found that difficult, we want to do things slightly differently, back off to a certain extent, but partly they are trying to do the good work as well. They are trying to find what that balance is for them, and they clearly haven't found it yet, but they're managing to do things along.
Remember cameras? What people had before mobile? With cameras, time to pre-order the new Samsung Galaxy S20 Ultra 5G with their best camera ever. Ultra wide 100 times space zoom. Trade in your old device for up to £350 off, and you get wireless Galaxy Buds Plus free. Pull the switcheroo to the Samsung Galaxy S20 Ultra 5G at Carphone Warehouse. Pre-order by March 8th. Claim on device March 10th to April 12th. T's and C's apply. Max trade-in value based on working S10. See website.
Way.
And it is really early days, and we'll possibly look back at this and think, that was just one perhaps sort of slight blip at the beginning of their married life and life as parents together. Certainly the interview they did with Tom Bradbury, where Meghan sort of said fairly outright that she wasn't terribly happy, was sort of quite sad to watch, really, in that it's almost like they sort of found themselves thrown into this situation with loads of great ideas, like all of us go into things. We've got loads of ideas. I want to do this. I want to do that. I want to do the other thing. But there's no actual sort of long-term strategy about what's the best thing. What's the best thing for us as a family, and what's the best way of us achieving our aims in this. And it had almost sort of slightly overwhelmed them. So maybe this 6 weeks out they're taking at Christmas, they'll be able to start reassess where are we going, what do we actually want to do, and come back a bit more open, should we say, and just generally calmer.
I think that the basis for me is, potentially taking a leaf out of Charles and Camilla's book, and you've got to have fun, because if you're not having fun, then work isn't you just don't want to go to work, and at the end of the day, this is a job, and no matter if they're trying to change the world or work with all these charities, and they have absolute power to do amazing things, but they do, you're totally right, they need a strategy, they need people behind them to actually know what they're doing as well, which I think has been one of the criticisms that's been labelled at the team around them, but also just be able to enjoy it. And like going back to seeing Harry when he was absolutely overjoyed when Archie came, I think essentially a lot of the people who I've spoken to who have covered this job for much longer than me have said that that's what he's lacking, unfortunately. So hopefully you go away, have a bit of a breather, even though it's sort of emerged the last couple of days that they're having meetings in the US to launch this US side of the foundation. So will it be the 6 months break that they needed if they're having all these other meetings? But listen, time will tell.
I mean, I know I said to you before that they've had their first child and sort of embarked on royal life at a very different stage in their lives to what William and Kate did. I mean, like, I wouldn't mind actually if they said, actually what we need to do is move to somewhere out of town, and actually Harry's going to get a job, I don't know, driving tractors or something, because that's maybe it's not like he was a helicopter, not a tank, but you know what I mean. Similar, it's basically the same but without guns, but it's fine.
I think that would be I do honestly think that'd be a brilliant idea, because Kate and William did do that. They went to live in Anglesey, and they were able to go to the local supermarket without anybody bothering them. And then they went up to Norfolk, and they spent a lot of time there, particularly when the children were very little. And they've obviously created friends there, and they were able to develop a sort of a normal-ish life. And I think when all the stuff came out from Harry and Meghan about saying that they were really unhappy and they felt they were being really watched all the time, and there's an awful lot of people in this country who think, well, you don't have to do it. If you don't like it, go and live on a big estate in Norfolk. There's plenty of them up there. I'm sure the Queen will pay, and just do what you like. But you've got to kind of work out which bits of this job you do want, which bits you don't. But then please don't moan if you don't like some of it.
And then it's, if you're doing, depending on what you're doing, then how you get paid for it, essentially, whether it's paid by us as taxpayers, or whether it's paid by the Queen, or how that will work.
But they're never going to be on the B-Men's, whatever, are they? There'll be enough money for them to keep going, even if they decided to take a very scaled down, simple life. They would have enough. They'd be given an estate, and they'd find enough to sort of do to pass the time.
They're both, and I think that's part of the problem, that they've tried to really throw themselves into it, and maybe Meghan should be absolutely celebrated for wanting to be involved with all these patronages. She was working, she came back after 3 months or 3 or 4 months after having Archie. But there is this feeling of just, this is a lifetimed role.
Yes.
This is not like an egg timer running out. You have an absolute lifetime to work out what you want to do.
Pace yourself.
But
maybe it does take a bit of time to
work out the
that.
pace. Maybe.
So I'm just going to read a comment from one of our Instagram followers. It's only me _Anna. Hello, Anna. She said, Archie's birth, Meghan's projects, Vogue, Smart Set, and all in Harry's work, highlighting smaller and unknown organisations, as they do on their Instagram feed each month following 12. And we've seen recently the nice picture from Meghan volunteering at a soup kitchen from back in the day.
That's a great, and again, it's a great idea.
That is something that they have done that is very smart.
Pioneering.
Actually,
No one else
strategy.
is doing
It's really good.
Amazing.
I mean, I do a little bit of social media. Fine, I've only learned about Instagram stories this year and where to find.
Well,
my
you're
messages.
doing very well.
Thank you, Russell. I am trying,
Smashing
and
the likes.
it is. I enjoy it. So thank you for humouring me, everybody who is on our page. And then the other thing that Anna mentioned was the Morocco and South Africa tours.
I mean, that tour was the pictures were every single day.
Her
they were
dancing
fantastic
with the township kids. It's just an absolute dream. She is magnificent. Like, you watching her deliver this speech about gender-based violence in a township in South Africa, one of the most, the murder capital of the country, essentially. And you can't fail to be in complete awe of her. But then on the flip side, you're like, he's almost looking nervous in the background. And if that was me, surely I've thought about this a lot, and I've watched him, and he does look a little bit nervous, and he starts like fidgeting and stuff. But she's such an amazing orator. Surely that is everything and more that you would have ever wanted. That she's a polished performer.
What do you think he's worried about though at that moment?
I think he's worried about her being taken advantage of by photographers or the press, and that certainly when she was dancing with the township, like he came up to her. I was standing in front of them, and he came up in front of her, and he just froze and
wanted it to end.
He wanted them to leave there, and she was having a great time. The kids were loving her being there, and it just comes down to just relaxing a little bit. And I just think, and again, that sort of documentary showed that he's got an awful lot of hang-ups. So.
But do you think he's also worried, like he already knew at that stage what Meghan then told Tom, that she wasn't necessarily very happy, she wasn't necessarily very comfortable with what was happening, what her role was in life. This was pretty much the first engagement of the tour, and it was a big tour not long after coming back from maternity leave. And he was just, worried about, she's trying to put on her good, I'm fine, I'm happy, I'm here. This is actually something that really means a lot to her. She's added in that line, which she'd thought about as she explained in the documentary, about adding in that line as being a woman of colour. And, it was a big deal. But you're kind of torn because, it's a big deal and you want it to be really good, but actually you're dealing with this other thing that you're struggling to find your place at the same time. I don't know. And ultimately we don't know what they're thinking.
No, but I get the whole him being super protective. It's very endearing. It's obvious as well. But Harry was without a doubt the most popular member of the royal family, adored by people all over the world because they saw him as this fun-loving prince who wasn't weighed down by the crown. And he's also really said, "God, who would ever want to be king? No way. I have this freedom," and they just sort of put the pressure on themselves almost. And I mean, that's how I do understand that he's an older man now. He's got his family. He obviously feels a great amount of responsibility to her and to his son, to seeing how he wants to grow up. But my only wish is that they start enjoying it a bit more, and I'm sure that will happen. Fingers crossed.
Ian Vogler was there in South Africa with you.
Yes,
and that was his favourite pictures of the year. So let's hear what Ian has to say.
My favourite picture this year has to be Meghan, Duchess of Sussex, dancing in the township on the recent visit to South Africa back in September. The visit started off as quite a boring visit, really, from what should have been an amazing experience in the township. There were dancers, there were children, there were people playing musical instruments, but the royal couple seemed to shy away from all of that. But as they were about to leave the township, some of the dancers just basically presented themselves to the royals and started dancing with Meghan, and then Harry joined in and the children joined in. And from what had looked like a boring event, we ended up with a fantastic set of pictures, loads of colour, loads of music, absolutely fantastic set of pictures that just happened in front of us at the very end of a long morning's visit to a township. My absolute favourite picture that day, though, was when a little boy, at the start of the visit, waving his little flag, just jumped out and embraced Meghan right in front of us. It was a really lovely moment.
Yeah, fair play, Ian. That was one of the pictures of the year for sure. Not just royal, but in general, I think. There's,
all that tour was hugely iconic, and again, sort of the Desmond Tutu pictures as well. Like, it's incredible moment.
It's a big deal. The other tour that came up a lot among our Instagram fans that people really enjoyed was the Pakistan tour.
Yes,
which just had like a bit of
just tremendous
wow factor somehow. I think it was the outfits. I mean, the fashion was incredible.
The backdrops as well,
like
the lights. That I remember speaking to Ian. Just the light was perfect all the time. They were at Tuk Tuk as well.
Oh yeah,
that was good. Shwami. What's the
I've already forgotten.
Shwami.
Yeah,
Shawani.
Shwani.
I know.
Kate just looked amazing throughout that
did.
entire tour. She was just. It's almost like she's had 3 children now. How old is she now? In her
36.
So moving into her late 30s. There's a sort of a confidence with who she is and what she's got to do, and that's really sort of started to shine through, I think, this year. And she doesn't seem at all worried by whatever's thrown at her. She really does seem to enjoy things. Like when she was playing cricket on that tour, she just looked fantastic. She looked like she's having a great time. And if Meghan could ever get to that point where she appears to enjoy things as much as Kate does, but has still managed to keep that role as a mother private and happy, then she'll pretty much have got there. I think Kate's been amazing this year.
For what you said earlier, that like having that opportunity to go to Anglesey, to go to Norfolk, that's that's probably stood them in really good stead. And a lot of what's labelled at me sometimes when I do say this, the fact that try and walk before you run and stuff like this, they're saying, well, the Cambridges did have an awful lot of time off from the spotlight, from doing engagements, and certainly the Sussexes have felt that they needed to jump into that straight away.
But then I guess there is a big difference as well in that Kate was a lot younger when she married into the royal family.
She's 37. She's nearly 38 in January.
Yeah. So, whereas Meghan was older.
It's not that old, Russell. I mean, I'm a little bit older.
I'm 38.
Oh, you're all very, very, very young.
Same age. You're basically Kate.
In every way. But whereas Meghan was older and I think had already had that career and was an independent woman, and she was like, self-sufficient, she would have probably, I would imagine the psychology that she'd think, well, I don't need to sort of start at the beginning. I can look after myself. I can do press conferences. It's no problem. I can do all that. But actually, this is a gig like no other, isn't it?
Yeah, totally. Right, I'm going to read some lovely comments from our Instagram fans about some of the Cambridge's work. So Ms. Molly Clare said, watching as Kate's work in maternal mental health and early years progresses, I'm so excited to see what the coming years bring in this area. It is key to making the future a better place for all of us. Miss Kerry D, Kate came out of maternity leave so fired up, and her garden projects and others are so darling to see. We need more Mike Tyndall and the legendary Princess Anne as well. So that was quite fun. And Adrienne Rutherford says, I loved Kate's involvement with developing the gardens that later we saw the children playing in, especially Charlotte saying, ooh la la.
Oh yeah, that's one of my highlights of the year.
Is it?
Yeah, definitely. I thought that was great. Louis sort of walking for the first time and going up to the camera and stuff. I thought that was great.
And I think, I don't know whether we're starting to really get to see the children. We don't see them very often, but they are definitely little people that, Charlotte sticking her tongue out and the regatta, and then, George being all toothy in his pictures. And I don't know, because they are now people in their own right.
Yes.
And we've got a bit more used to it. I feel like, I don't know whether Meghan is a little bit subsumed under Archie, because she's no longer the shiny new thing. Archie's the shiny new thing that people want to see, and she's protecting that, whereas that's moved on for Kate, and Kate can, I don't know, that is back to being herself. And
you do feel that things. And I think that program that she's launched around trying to get kids outdoors it's a brilliant thing, and it just seems to be her thing as well, and that she was always very sporty, wasn't she, from when we very first met Kate.
Grew up in the countryside as well.
Yeah, and it just seems to fit with who she is and how she's probably bringing her kids up. And you see when the kids are sort of running around, and that it just seems like they are having a fairly kind of healthy, outdoor, dirty, rolling in the mud, normal lifestyle, which I think is what people like to see.
And I think one thing that I remember really clearly from this year is you talking about that the conference that Kate was at, where she was making notes and then got up and made her speech,
which she's getting so much better at. I mean, some of the unfair criticism perhaps is because she goes to these events and she doesn't necessarily explore or give her opinion. But I think she is quite like a sponge, and she's been very, very careful. Again, coming back to, this is a marathon, not a sprint, a lifetime's work. Yeah. This early years stuff is really, really going to be a lifetime's of work. So she doesn't want to say anything that could be labelled against her or potentially stop her progress in the future. Next year, there's some exciting stuff coming up, definitely.
Oh, Tease.
I am. That's a tease. That's a tease.
And can I just say one thing about your Princess Anne comment as well? Having watched the new series of The Crown, my opinion of Princess Anne has changed enormously. What a laugh she used to be when she was younger.
Yeah.
Instagram is full of amazing pictures of her at the moment as well. Just like, her wedding dress with the amazing sleeves, which I absolutely love. And her looking just really quite... sort of beautiful and ethereal, but having, she almost Princess Leia, like somehow there's
about to say Star Wars.
There's something sort of like serene somehow, and she's got that kind of the stare that people thought they saw with the shrug and all of that, the kind of death stares or not. But yes, so that was fun. Mike Tyndall was actually Kitty Hublin's one of her favourite moments as well. Mike Tyndall's tiny chocolate hat and the Queen's reaction.
That was good.
And
was it last year or this year where he messaged you on Twitter?
That was last year.
To
tell
did
us.
he?
Yeah. Yes, because one of our
practically royalty.
Yeah, practically royalty. Not going to be at Sandringham. If Andrew gets to go and I don't, I think that's outrageous. But no, so one of our listeners had asked how you say their newest child's name. Is it Lena or Lena? And he replied and just said, it's Lena.
Amazing.
Which was very nice. So thank you, Mike, for replying to that and clearing up that that question. What's been your favourite visit that you've actually been on this year?
I did love Africa. It was great. Not only going to South Africa, but the Angola trip as well with Harry was hugely iconic. I felt it was sort of a changing of the guard almost. I'm sure we'll see him doing a lot more in that field. Morocco was great with the Sussexes. That was really, really good fun.
Mars Russell.
It's not been a bad year, is it?
How about a UK visit? I'm going to play Mr. and Mrs. with you and Ian Vogler now, because I've asked him what his favourite UK visit was as well.
UK visit. Come back to me. You've put me on the
spot. Come back to you. All right. Well, we'll listen to Ian Vogler and see what he has to say.
In yet another busy year following the Royals, we found ourselves earlier on this year, back in February, in Belfast. Absolutely loved Belfast, great place. Often rains, and it certainly didn't let us down on the rain front. A short visit by the Duke and Duchess of Cambridge, but they were greeted by people all over the place. It's always been a difficult place for the Royals to visit, for obvious reasons, but they certainly cut through, and people came out to visit them. The weather, well, it rained rather a lot, but the pictures were good and the atmosphere was fantastic. The couple visited a famous pub, they launched a lifeboat. All in all, it had to be my favourite visit this year.
So are you Ian's missus? Are you Belfast your favourite as well?
No, I did like that, but I did really like two recent jobs, and that was Harry with the legendary Welsh rugby player Gareth Thomas speaking about HIV and during HIV testing week, which was, I just felt, a really important moment of the year, and it's probably one of my favourite stories of the year when Gareth Thomas came and spoke about the fact that he's HIV positive and what that means for him as, not being just a homosexual man in the sporting arena, but also that the fact that he's living with this virus and how he's combating it and how he's now making it his life work to break down the stigma of that.
And the things that he's been doing since revealing his, or sharing the news that he had
he's
that
a fantastic
diagnosis.
Man.
But
Really,
the
cool
kind
guy.
of the epic feats of sportingness that he's doing.
He did Iron Man.
He did Iron Man,
I've watched him do it.
It all just means more now.
Yeah.
And he might have been doing those things anyway, but now it means more, and he can really amplify that understanding of living with that condition.
Yeah, he was at the Mirror's Pride of Sport Awards last week, and I was talking to him, and he was saying how amazing Prince Harry had been, and not just for a photograph or one message, but in an ongoing way. And I think that's been one of the, and I think because obviously we would regard him as a sort of sporting giant, he probably doesn't think of himself in that way. He just thinks of himself as a guy who played rugby. And I think the fact that Prince Harry had taken that much interest in him was really quite overwhelming.
And that's interesting because, Harry's obviously such a massive rugby fan. He'd probably be like, I'm getting to speak to Gareth.
Definitely. It was like fangirling.
Yeah.
Two of them, and they'd never met before. They'd spoken, but they'd never met until that engagement. And then they were, because I was speaking to Gareth quite a lot about it, and obviously he's bigging up Harry massively. Harry's done at least two HIV tests publicly. He's spoken about it all over the world, and I think that is something. Obviously, again, another life's work.
And
my other one.
Yeah, your other one.
This is something that I'm really, really interested in, because I think the four of them should all be celebrated for bringing mental health into the public conversation. You know, we're very, very blessed to live in a time now where we are able to speak about this mental health, whether it's in the workplace or in the sports arena, and certainly William has pushed it further, really, by doing stuff with the FA, with his work with the president of the FA, this new Heads Up campaign, and him going all around all the sort of football clubs, and even going into the enemy's backyard, because he's a Aston Villa fan. But he went
we saw that amazing picture of him with Prince George at the football, didn't we?
Yeah, that again is a
so
great
sweet.
moment of him absolutely losing his mind by going cheering on the team. But when I was at West Brom with him, and he was speaking, you know, to a couple of players who had lost close family members to suicide, and he's not just there paying lip service to these guys. He is very, very knowledgeable about it. It's a real passion. He really wants to use the two sort of arenas that he's mostly involved in to try and break down this massive stigma.
Lots more to come on that in the new year as well.
Yeah.
I did ask Ian Vogler one last thing, which was what was his favourite Russellism of the year? Like, what was his favourite Russell moments? So
here we go.
I think I'd forgotten that I'd invited your boss in. But
so I get my P45.
Let's see how we go.
For those of our regular listeners, you'll know that I get to take the pictures and Russell Myers gets to write the words. I would be very unprofessional if I said anything negative about Russell, but I think this year perhaps I'll get him an alarm clock for his Christmas present. It's a delight to work with Russell. He's hard-working, knows a good story when he sees one, but maybe it's an alarm clock in your Christmas stocking this year, Russell.
So you're going to tell us what you were looking for then, Russell?
So as we, when we're in the UK or we're abroad, we have a Royal Rota because we all can't go at the same time. And sometimes I may have misplaced my diary when we were in South Africa, and I was due
in a
to
bar,
be
potentially.
No comment. And I was due to be at an engagement with the Duchess of Sussex, and suddenly Valentine Lowe from the Times newspaper rang me and said, "Where are you?" And I said, "What are you talking about? I'm watching the rugby." Whilst the Rugby World Cup were going on, he said, "Will you better get down to this engagement?" Luckily, I made it just in time.
Well done. All that running paid off. Good. All right. Well, alarm clocks from all your Secret Santas. Maybe
Cheers,
Google Calendar as well. Get that working. There's lots more to look forward to with the Royals next year. We'll be covering it every step of the way. Again, thank you to our lovely listeners for joining us throughout 2019. There has been a lot to talk about. Alison, thanks for coming back.
Thank you.
Joining us. We look forward to maybe inviting you back again next year.
Look forward to it.
So, yeah. And Russell, have a lovely break over Christmas time.
You too.
And we'll see you in the new year, 2020. Oh, my goodness. So, yeah, we'll hang out on Instagram. We'll be over there for over the holiday season as well, and we will see you in the new year. But until next time,
God save the Queen!